today. We're going to be having a really interesting conversation with some really smart people that'll help us talk about MLS data aggregation. I am Marilyn Wilson. I am the president of RETechnology and one of the founding partners of the Wave Group Consulting. And I got to tell you that this topic has just gotten a lot of buzz and a lot of play recently with pretty much every one of the MLSs that we work with around the country. So we thought it would be time to sort of help us all kind of frame this conversation, talk to some people that have a ton of experience in the area to help us all really make better decisions and be more informed in terms of how to make this program make sense for all of us. So with that, I'm going to suggest to you, if you look on the right-hand side of your screen, there is a little box and there's a little section that's called questions. So feel free to ask a question at any time throughout the session. We probably will have some dedicated time at the end, but if there's something you really want us to answer as we're going through, feel free. So with that, I'm going to jump in. If you can click to the first slide, Robin, we'll start the program. So first, you know, these are words, MLS data and aggregation and distribution. What does that mean, right? Those are kind of a mouthful, and we thought it would make sense to just sort of frame first what we're here to talk about. So there's a lot of people today, whether it be a broker or a technology company, that's looking for data that MLSs can provide from multiple markets around the country. And to do that, well, while it sounds like it might be not that difficult, as our title suggests, it's not rocket science, it's harder. It's pretty complicated. There's a lot of things that go into that, and you really have to kind of know what you're doing, or you have to find someone to partner with that knows what they're doing to really deliver the types of service that is so important to brokers and technology companies today. So let's jump to the next slide. And here's some of the challenges, and we're going to talk a lot more about this through the session, but I thought I would just kind of open it up a little bit. So the first thing is that, as we all know, there's about 700 MLSs around the country, each of which does things just a little bit differently, whether that be business rules, whether that be compliance against the business rules, whether that be the way the contract's written, the fees that are collected, variety of different things. Every market's different. And every data feed is different. And these guys are going to talk about, what they've learned about that there's normalization that's required in markets where MLSs operate, kind of contiguously. There's deduplication where there might be a listing listed in more than one place. And sometimes MLS's feeds are updated regularly, but sometimes something happens, whether it be software or an update or a rules change that gets communicated effectively, a variety of things, right? So people that know what they're doing in data have to deal with those issues, and they kind of make it look easy for the rest of us, but it's really not. The other thing is that this is not something that you can, grab 5 college graduates out of school and go put them to work and they already understand this. The domain knowledge for this it's really kind of an art and a science. And so there's not that many people in the world that really can talk to it and that have proven that they know how to do it. So we're going to be talking to some of them today. And then you will also be talking about that, sometimes there's weird things that happen in different markets in terms of the way a data is reflected, the way addresses are shown, the way people talk about a patio versus in some other part of the country. There's a million different things that go on. And so again, normalization and deduplication of that can be quite a challenge for people. So I'm really proud to introduce, if you can flip to the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to our panel who's going to tell you all kinds of neat things about this stuff. So first we've got Jim Harrison. I'm sure many of you probably know him. He is CEO of MLSLIstings, which is a highly progressive MLS located in the Bay Area, very broker-driven, beta tester for pretty much every exciting new program that goes on out there. Leaders in the RESO, our Real Estate Standards Organization, they're a really, really smart group, and that's led by Jim's efforts to really step ahead and always do the right thing. Ken Jennings, the CEO of Transcend. Many of you might know him. He's shall I say, an outspoken consultant who works with many brokers, technology companies, and MLSs to really help them grow their businesses in exciting new ways and uses data as a core component of that. And then finally, we've got Joel McIntosh, who is the CEO of WolfNet. Again, many of you probably know him. He's one of the largest IDX and VOW vendors in the country, noted as really high ground, do the right thing kind of a company, solid, has done a ton of data aggregation, and we're going to hear more from Joel in a little while. So with that, I wanted to say hello, and we're going to start with Jim. I'm going to ask Jim a few questions about his role in this world. So welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And Jim is at the CoreLogic user group meeting today, so he's taking step out of his education to help us, so we appreciate that, Jim. So, I guess the first question, just to open it up, is, you do a lot of different things at MLS Listings, but kind of tell us about the type of data aggregation and distribution that you'd provide to your brokers and technology companies, and also what you're doing with some new ventures that you have in terms of your own needs for data aggregation and distribution.
Okay, so we're big into data sharing right now. So we're pulling in data from CRMLS and MetroList and Veris and San Francisco and 3 MLSs in East Bay, and we're working on mapping data from Palm Springs and from the MLS in Beverly Hills. And so we are aggregating data from multiple listing services, and so that's not so different from what Joel has to go through as he's moving into different markets. So even with data standards and the data dictionary and all that stuff, there's still differences in data feeds, and make data available to our brokers or their vendors and their vendors as well. And we were asked the other day by an MLS on the East Coast if we could share our data licensing agreement, and my response to them was, for what purpose? Because I have 64. I have 64 different variation licensing data, because we do custom feeds. We do full feeds, API-based feeds, IDX feeds, val feeds. We don't distribute pictures. We distribute a link to the images, so we're securing the images. And we don't light up a vendor unless a broker asks for that vendor to be lit up with a data feed. Now, one of the things we've done that accommodates our data mapping activity is we have a patent on a data mapping tool. So we basically have our target schema and then we pull in the schema from the database that we're going to map to, and we basically can sit down and go, this equals that, in a spreadsheet format without actually using a spreadsheet. Engineers have a way of building tools to make their job more efficient, and this one I was able to get a patent on.
Gotcha. Okay. So it sounds like you're using it in a lot of different ways. What are the kinds of things you're seeing that your brokers are asking you for? What do they want data for, and how are they using it?
Well, to the large degree, they just want data for their websites. Now, nobody's asking. I have had some brokers talk to me about, I wish you just had APIs so I didn't have to store all that data. And so we have an API-based data feed, which means you just have to store a small set of data and then reference back to our database for the rest of it. So that'll save brokers some money in the long run, because they won't have to buy as much storage and maintain as much content. So we also can provide an aggregated data feed. So we can provide a broker a data feed with data from multiple markets from our data share partners. And what's interesting at the moment is not all brokers want that, because they're still getting data from multiple markets, and it ends up creating duplications for them to have to manage.
Gotcha. Okay. So maybe you can talk to us, because it sounds like you're kind of doing this yourself. You're aggregating data from a variety of different MLSs, and there are, as we know, many brokers that are trying to create their own region, if you will, by putting things together. What are the kinds of challenges that that brokers face today when they're trying to create regional displays of information?
Well, they're running up against even in MLSs that have all adopted the RISO Platinum certified data dictionary. There's still different contracts for brokers and their vendors to sign. There's still different ways people charge for data feeds. There's still policies, data policies, where some MLSs are actually saying we won't allow you to have data for this particular product. That's not our position. We don't make a decision on which products our brokers can use, but the brokers are running into that in some marketplaces. Some MLSs won't support syndication when that's kind of a more efficient way for many brokers to distribute their data, so they end up having to use their website vendor to distribute their data, and it sometimes just isn't very efficient. and I've seen a lot of the brokers, vendors that distribute their data farm to the portals they're doing it with FTP. So they're not really using today's
Wow.
modern technology.
Gotcha.
I understand the issues that Joel runs into in his business, because I've got a tool. We've got a business intelligence product that we've taken to market, and now in our own marketplace, and now we want to go, we want to roll this out in other markets. But what's holding me back is I have to go map data from hundreds of other MLSs, and I would rather work with somebody like Joel, who's already done that.
Gotcha. So you're kind of sitting on the side of what a technology company goes through now and seeing how fun it is, huh?
Right.
How not fun it is. Yeah. Gotcha. So this is kind of a little bit of a side question, and maybe this is just me, but I get the sense that recently there's been a lot more discussion about MLS data aggregation and distribution. It's a kind of a hot thing now. What do you think's driving the focus on this right now, and why are there so many people entering into this space?
Well, so if you look at Trestle came into the space to essentially be a proxy ret server for all their CoreLogic customers, because they couldn't possibly, make, hundreds and hundreds of MLSs RESO compliant by the NAR mandated deadline. And so now Trestle has the ability to be a utility for MLSs to use for distributing their data and managing it. And there haven't been a lot of really modern tools out there for distributing data. Generally, MLSs get a turnkey vendor solution for setting up data feeds for their customers, and it's just been a solution in a box that just hasn't evolved very much over the years. And so a lot of us have gone out and done our own thing. We have our own broker control dashboard and our own utility for distributing data, and so Trestle is a good solution for a lot of people because there was a need out there, and it's just like once you've got the data and you understand what else people need. They need e-commerce, they need brokers to log in and pick their preferences on where their listings go, and then they need the vendor community to be prepared to take a data feed from Trestle. And now Bridge has been out there for a long time, much longer than, Zillow just only recently acquired Bridge, but Bridge is a tool that MLSs have been using for a dozen years, and it gives the MLSs more control and more options on how to manage broker data feeds and vendor data feeds. And then the new initiative out there called Grid, which is a handful of MLSs have gotten together and they're creating their own data distribution utility. And I think the reason for that is, it became a little obvious when the larger brokers circled their wagons and invented the upstream initiative, because it was clear that they did not feel like they were in control of their data, and weren't completely happy with what other parties were doing with their data, and needed a better utility to manage how they distributed their data and what was done with it. And so there's, I think, multiple initiatives going on that have created today's need for having better utilities for distributing data. There's the need for MLSs to be RESO certified and meet the NAR mandate for being RESO certified, which originated the Trestle program, and then now Trestle has grown into a utility that can do a lot of other things. And then Grid is an alternative to Trestle, and then Zillow, Retsley are taking the Bridge product out to marketplace with the different modules that are built into that to solve solutions there. And I really think it's all about creating more modern tools for satisfying the needs of the brokerage community.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's interesting. It sounds like there's 3 or 4 factors kind of coming all together that are driving the interest, huh? So you've been in this situation, and for those that don't know, MLSLIstings hosts a lot of their own solutions, and they're in Silicon Valley, which means they have some amazing engineers that they can draw on and do some really cool stuff. So you're definitely a leader in this space and probably ahead of many of other MLSs in the country. So if those that are on the call are, they're at this place now, they're hearing and they know that they've got to provide one or more solutions in this space, what criteria do you think they should be looking for when they're looking for partners? And should they just be using one, or do you think they should look at a bunch of them, or kind of what's your perspective on that?
Well, so since there's really two solid options right now, being Trestle and being the Retsley bridge solution, I think when you're looking at those, you want a vendor that's a partner. That's not only going to light you up and take your data and show you how to use it, but is going to be there to evolve as your business evolves. So you need a flexible, trusted partner, and you need somebody that you can trust. If you're going to give them your data, you want to make sure it's not going into a Trojan horse where something else happens to the data that you didn't intend for it to happen. Because remember, we're the trusted source by our customers for maintaining the integrity of the data and not allowing it to be abused. But when we partner with a third party, we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. That everybody knows exactly what you can and can't do with the data as it goes into third-party utility.
Gotcha. And are there technical kinds of, not to go too deep on that, but are there general areas of things that people should be asking about in terms of, I don't know, security, servers? You tell me, what kinds of things should they be looking for generally?
Well, so I'm going to admit that I'm not an engineer. But certainly, okay. I would expect whatever utility you're using to be cloud-based and to have some redundancy, and to be secure so they can't be hacked into. Now, I can't tell you how you make a database. That's what I have engineers for. Make it secure. But certainly that security, it's got to be a great concern because just about anything can be hacked nowadays.
Gotcha. Okay. And is there anything in terms of depth of experience or anything you should look for, do you think?
Well, so there is, there's not a whole lot of people in this space that really, are very knowledgeable about aggregation and distribution of data. I mean, there's CoreLogic's doing an amazing job with Trestle. And then there's actually the highly technical MLSs that are creating the grid solution, and then the bridge product. And I think what you want to look at is something that is going to be modern. I mean, right now, when you distribute data to third parties, generally you're sending everything about that listing to that vendor. I mean, all fields of data and all the pictures. And we need to embrace distributing via APIs because it's a little bit more effective than simple RETs, and also secures the data much better.
Gotcha. So should we be looking for people that are involved with RESO that understand how data standards can help as well?
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. So I'm going to jump over to, let's flip over to WolfNet because they're going to show us their program in a little while. But you've been working with these guys for several years, I believe, with them providing IDX and VOW feeds to your members, as well as a program that you're rolling out with them. So tell us about your experience with them.
Well, so I've known Joel for about 20 years, I guess, and one of the things I've always been impressed with Joel about is he's a stickler for playing by the rules. He signs a contract to get the data feed from an MLS, and he will call and turn himself in and say, I think maybe I did something I shouldn't have done, and I just want you to know that. And so nobody does that, right? And there's vendors that they get data from MLSs, and we have to audit them on a regular basis to make sure it doesn't get redistributed to somebody else. We found our data on Bank of America's website one day, and we seed our data so we can tell which vendor got our data and sent it to Bank of America. And so we track that down and we audit them. And fortunately, Joel is somebody you don't have to worry about. He's very much a stickler about playing by the rules. He knows our industry. Everybody respects him. The company has some really innovative products. He's actually my wife's website vendor. She's a broker. And it was not a problem for me to tell her exactly which vendor she needed to work with when she wanted a website. So I would consider them a trusted and innovative partner. They're always doing something new, and Joe's not going to tell you that he's going to do something and have it ready next month. He's going to say, well, I've got to do this, this, and this, but I've got to do it for 600 marketplaces, so I'll get back to you in September. But he's going to tell you. He's going to be honest. He's going to tell you what's going on and how long it's going to take. And right now I have that BI product I was talking about earlier, a broker analytics tool, and I want to move it into multiple markets, but I don't want to go map data for multiple markets. Well, he already has, and he's already normalized that data. So more people should think about using WolfNet or a company like WolfNet that's already in multiple markets and has already normalized data coming from disparate databases into one, normalized set of schema.
Yeah, so even an MLS like you that's pretty serious about their technology recognizes that that's a pain in the butt, that it is rocket science. And why deal with that when you've got your own local issues? That your focus should be on giving customer service to the people that are around you and not worrying about trying to build out a whole team to do that stuff. Is that a fair statement?
It is.
Gotcha. All right, cool. All right, so any words of advice you want to give to MLSs about that, maybe they're at the stage of trying to figure out who to work with, and then we're going to jump over to Ken in a second.
Well, so check references. I mean, if you're looking at one of these products that are already out there for aggregation and distribution of data, you want to know that they're going to be responsive. The best way to find out if they're going to be responsive is to talk to their customers and say, do you get what you want? Do they deliver on time? Are they distributing data based on current RESO standards? Have they adopted the data dictionary? What tools do they have for security, for e-commerce, for creating solutions for brokers to be able to log in to that utility and pick their preferences on where their data goes when it gets into that utility.
Gotcha. Okay, great. All right. Thank you so much, Jim. We'll probably come back to you with questions at the end, but thank you for that opening. It was really helpful. So, Mr. Jenny, how are you today? Is he muted? Can someone unmute him? Because I know he likes to talk. It's not him not talking to us. There we go. Ken, can you hear me now? Can you talk now? Uh-oh.
Okay, I think I can hear you now.
You can hear me now, and we can hear you now. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming today, Ken. We appreciate your always candid feedback, which I'm sure we're going to hear in a second. So we know you work with tons of, large brokers, technology companies, franchises, et cetera, et cetera. So what are the kinds of things that you're hearing that your clients are needing MLS data for these days? What are they doing with it?
Well, thanks for having me on the panel, Marilyn. I think that to establish the value of the MLS services, you need to understand that the brokers look at the data they use in their business as a fuel for their businesses. Without the fuel and proper management of the fuel, they have issues. And today, when you measure the MLS industry as the current provider of that trusted service, the brokers look at it from two perspectives before they even start to use the data. One is, how do they get the data into the system? Is it one place, 100 places, 15 places, 700 places? Some brokers, it requires 15, 20 places they need to enter the data. So that's one aspect. Then data out means, how do they get the data out to manage their businesses for two reasons. One, lead generation. So that's the consumer display of the information. And the other piece is transaction generation, which is all the tools, back office management, transaction management systems, CMA systems. How do they use that fuel, and how easy is it for them to get it back, either themselves or through vendors?
Gotcha. So they're struggling with that question. So leads to my next question. How difficult is it for them to do that? Like, if they're looking for, let's just say someone that's a large broker, they say they want to be in 50 MLSs. What does it take for them to actually get that done today?
Well, it depends. I mean, if a broker's in one MLS, they've got to negotiate with the MLS and the MLS committees and all the various things that particular MLS has as a firewall to getting the information back. That can be very complicated, it can be very simple. It really depends on the MLS. If you're a broker, though, with 15 or 20 MLSs, like Kai's company in Southeast Florida, as an example, has, I believe, 15 MLSs they need to deal with. So if you ask that question to Wendy Iglesias with Kai, she'd say it's a pain. It's a real pain.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ideally, the brokers, Marilyn, would want to see the MLS like an airline. You show up, you get on the plane, and you get to where you're going. But unfortunately, the brokers are forced to manage the baggage, figure out the reservation systems, know all the policies and procedures, understand the maintenance of the airplane. They shouldn't have to do these kinds of things. And it's very difficult for them, especially the bigger brokers and multiple MLSs, to navigate this whole process. It's obviously be simpler with one, but we're not getting there very fast. So that's a huge frustration with the brokerage community.
It's interesting. That's an interesting analogy. If I just want to sit down and buckle my seatbelt, I don't want to have to fly the plane at the same time. That's an interesting way of looking at it. And so when they have those struggles, so let's take Kai's as an example. So what does it take when they want to get 15, data from 15 MLSs that are going to fuel, let's just say their website or their back office system? What does it take? Does it take them months, years, days? Where do they get stuck?
You have MLS leaders like Jim, who just spoke about his regional effort in the Bay Area. That, if you have the blessing of working in those MLSs and you work with Jim, it sounds like it's pretty simplified. But if you don't, you have to work through third parties that have figured this out and know how to do it well, because, as Jim said, you can get disparate databases of information. And I guess I have to say that I've said for a long time, giving big data to brokers is like giving gasoline to homeless people. Nothing good is going to happen. Nothing good is going to happen. They don't have the facilities or the capabilities to handle the data. So they're really depending on the MLS industry to make this an easy entry process and an easy exit process so they can use the data. And if you don't have the benefit of like a Jim Harrison or some other leader in the industry who's done the painstaking efforts of putting together different databases from disparate MLSs, then you have to deal with a third party who knows how to do it, like WolfNet.
Gotcha. And do any of the MLSs that you work with, someone have a question? I heard some echo there. Anyway, how many of the brokerages you work with or the technologies you work with, do they actually have their own people internally that are trying to deal with all this data stuff, or do they give up and say, I'm going to go to third parties, or both?
I think the brokers have spent, I don't know, nearly $1 billion trying to do it themselves with a B. I bet it might be more. And they give up on that. They've given up on it because now, thankfully, there are third parties they can go to get the information. But I think some of the vendors have chosen, rather than to go through, especially if they go in through a nationwide offering of something, that they can't depend on the MLSs to get the information separately. They go create their own feeds from those MLSs to fuel their tools, and then they offer those tools to the broker because they know the last thing the broker wants to do is go to each of the MLSs and negotiate a deal to get the fuel to their, say, CMA system to make it work. They want to pull up to the gas station and fuel up. They don't want to go to 15 gas stations to fuel up.
Gotcha. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how big a pain point would you describe trying to deal with these kinds of issues for large brokers?
10 being the worst?
Yeah.
15.
Okay, then. I guess it's something MLSs have to deal with, it sounds like. All right, gotcha. So I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Jim. There seems to be an awful lot of attention recently to this whole idea of data aggregation and distribution. What do you think's driving that? Is there a broker saying, I've had enough, I just want to sit on the plane and not drive it anymore, or what's happening?
Well, I think, like everything else, you hear tipping points. Where's the tipping point? I think the tipping point is past. The brokers have clearly stated their frustrations with the MLS industry on many regards. Mm-hmm. This is one of them, consumer-facing websites, the list goes on. And, there's large groups of brokers like the Realty Alliance who've been very candid about what they wanted to do, and then it evolved into upstream, and that's nicely failed, in my opinion. And so they've stated their cause, they've stated their needs, both on we don't want to do multiple entry to get into 15, 5, 10, 2 MLSs, And we don't want to make it difficult to get the information back out of your aggregated database that you say you're protecting for us. You're really doing a great job of protecting it from the people that own the data, which is the brokers. And it's very for them to maneuver through that. So I think they've been very vocal, they being the brokers and their agents, about their frustrations. And I just don't think there have been a lot of answers. There have been a lot of placating. There have been a lot of Band-Aids put on it. A lot of intermediaries that show up. But I don't think anybody's really addressed the core issue.
I gotcha. All right. So we're here to talk about at least some portion of solving the problem with WolfNet. So it sounds like you've worked with them quite a bit with some of your technology companies and things. Tell us about the kinds of projects you've worked on with, or that you've partnered with WolfNet on, and your experience with them.
Sure. I mean, Jim said he's known Joel for 20 years. I have not known Joel for 20 years, but I have been witnessing what Joel's done in 20 years. I think that's the most impressive piece of this whole equation. Joel and his team, and I did my due diligence. I'm a consultant to many different and varied companies in the industry who are trying to figure this mess out. And whenever they say to me, who can we trust with, fueling up our engine so we can sell stuff to brokers and agents, I always point them to Joel, because at the end of the 20 years, his company's done some amazing things that you can depend on. And you cannot have a data aggregator that's a definite maybe. You've got to have a data aggregator that has absolute knowledge of the business, scope and capability of managing the data, eliminating duplicate data. Standardizing the data is not something the MLS is good at. I don't care whether you talk about RETs or RESO. It's we're the only industry to seem to have optional standards that aren't met. People that are supposed to be meeting these standards to make it easy. So good for WolfNet that they're there. Good for them that they have a business because of the inability of the MLS industry to meet standards for data use and data definition. But there are companies that can't, just take a flyer on this one. They need to do their due diligence. They need to find out who's aggregating the data, and finding out, importantly, how they can distribute it to vendors and brokers who need it to drive their business.
Gotcha. And how do you do due diligence on that program? Because of course everyone's going to tell you they know how to do it, right?
Well, yeah.
How do you know that they're legit?
I mean, there's a lot of people that have, as I said, a lot of vendors come to the table and say we're a turnkey solution. We have all the data, we have the SEO, we have the websites, we have everything all right here. I don't think you can be a master of many things in the industry. I think you need to pick a company that's a master at one thing that you need and stick with them. And doing data on the side, is not something that I would recommend to people if they do the data on the side, or yeah, we can go get that for you, or we can negotiate new agreements for you, and we don't have that, but we'll get it. All those situations have been a total failure when I go to people and they say, oh yeah, we're going to get the data, we don't have it, but we'll get it. So I think when you go look at a data aggregator, you need to look at their history, you need to talk to their current customers, and you need to understand that this is not an easy business. This is not something you do at home without adult supervision. This is something that is critical to your business. And I would look for a company that focuses on this, has a long history in doing this, and has satisfied customers.
Great. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ken. We're going to flip it over to Joel McIntosh. And if we can switch to the next slide, Robin, that would be great. And Joel, I'm going to let you kind of walk us through what WolfNet does and how it satisfies the needs of people that are looking to aggregate and distribute MLS data. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it very much. Jim, thank you. Ken, thank you. Well, just a little bit, maybe a tad bit more on who we are. I mean, WolfNet, we started up in '96, and we were kind of a work-for-hire web dev shop in 25 industries. We entered the real estate space in 1998 and offered our first IDX product in the year 2000 in Minnesota, our regional MLS here. And we pioneered one of the first map-based property searches and cleverly launched it on April Fool's Day in 2005. And then ultimately we pivoted to operating exclusively in the real estate space in 2006. Shortly after that, I think it was maybe a month or two, is when we received a subpoena from the Department of Justice, and I was in that DOJ NAR case over VOW. I'd never been subpoenaed before, so anyway, we contributed some 40, 50, 60 hours of research, of correspondences. I think we rolled out our first BOW solution in 2002, so we had a little bit of history and experience with it. So that's a good story over beers if anybody ever wants to ask me. But I call us a pretty dedicated participant in the industry. We've been involved in RESO. We've been a member for years. We attend the CMLS conferences and NAR and Inman and many of the other ones. And we are a responsible steward of the MLS data. So we certainly do, IDX and VOW for somewhere in the neighborhood of 80,000 plus users out there. We currently access and standardize data from over 640 MLSs. It's about 99% of the active inventory in the U.S. It's some 5 million active listings. I think it's around 3.4 million deduplicated. We host about 120 million or so photos on our systems, which are available through through URLs, like Jim mentioned, so you can secure it a little bit better. We do website systems, and really the key, what we're talking about today, is the data standardization services. So we've had more than 600 of the MLSs out there expressly have approved us to provide data as a third party, as an aggregator, consolidator for vendors and brokers out there who need the data to make life a little bit easier for them. Just for a little background, some of our customers are, Keller Williams International, Zap Labs with Realogy. We work with Chime, Realty Executives, Smarter Agent. We've known them for a very long time, Back Agent, NRT, and many others. I'd like to list them all, leave them all credit, because it's their trust in us which has us where we're at. But really, again, the focal point is on the data ag. And, the question was, why is it so important and why do we need it right now? And what's funny is when we reach out and ask an MLS, we might reach out to a new one and say, hey, we have this new vendor is coming in, they'd like to get data. We act as a third party, we help them standardize the data, and we seek permission because that's the right thing to do. We've been in business for so long and built this reputation, we're not going to risk making a stupid mistake that, and do something that we're not authorized to do. That makes no sense. So, but sometimes we get a response back that might be on, something like, well, RESO is here, so there's no need for that. Or hey, vendors can just get it themselves and do it themselves. And it's really not that simple. So I think part of this is to help explain, why it's so complicated. And really the innovation that's out there's so much innovation in the marketplace, and there's a lot of capital that's been pouring into the real estate industry, and this is translating directly into demand. And these companies really, they want to focus on launching their products quickly, and they want to focus on application development, not on data management. And ultimately, that's what the members want. That's what the brokers and the agents who are the beneficiaries of those services desire, as speed. And so the tech vendors are really looking for, and tech companies are really looking for an easy button for the data access. But there's very high barriers to entry. Especially at scale when you're trying to do something like this nationally. And unfortunately, some of those vendors are seeking alternative methods for acquiring MLS data that we might label below the board. And that happens. It's unfortunate, but it is happening, and it is out there, and it's not a good deal. We've seen our share of that, and we can't be a policeman all the time for that sort of thing. But let's say that we've done our part. We think it's unacceptable, and we wanted a solution, put a solution out there that makes sense. And we really started providing these services roughly 7 years ago, where we fully productized this notion of MLS data aggregation and distribution. And so I believe we've done it the right way. And there's really no resources in the market that are simple to get a hold of that tell you, how do MLSs work? What are the differences? What about the data? What data is available? What data isn't available? How do you comply with the various different rules and regulations and the right disclaimers and things you have to display? What about contracts? Are they all the same? Or are they different? How much does it cost for each MLS or MLS A, B, or C? how long does it take, and all that. There's really no easy answers. People go fuddling through this, which is inefficient, and it creates more cost, and and it really deters the members from getting, I think, what they need. So on the next slide, I figured I'd just take a second and describe, like, what does it take to actually manage all this data? And first of all, when you originate the data like we do, it's definitely more complex, than being a recipient of a standardized feed. The need for people, database people, system administrators, developers, project managers, technical support folks, customer service people, operations, there's a need for all of that. Hardware, if you're running your own system or using a cloud, so there's data and photo servers for loading data and transforming the data, processing it, hosting it. We run bandwidth and anywhere in the neighborhood of 250 to 400 terabytes per month, which is it's a pretty fair amount. The data storage can be pretty challenging. We use a storage area network system, and we also have a Ceph storage solution. And I think the total for data and photos for MLS is about 40 terabytes, so it's a fair amount. We use a content delivery network for photo distributions through the URLs. So it's much faster. It means that their content delivery networks are, it means there's, I think there's 120 different points around the world where you can access that data rather than it just being from one or two different data centers. It speeds it up. It's a lot faster, more efficient. There's a lot of data transformation scripts to get the data into a single format. Sophisticated data monitoring and data validation systems to make sure that it's, that we're getting what we expect and that the data is passing all the tests and it's correct. And there's a lot of maintenance. There's a lot of unexpected changes. Sometimes we get noticed. More often than not, we do not get noticed when there are changes. Where it's like our team sometimes refers to it as whack-a-mole. So there's a lot of stuff we got to deal with there. And the cost. I don't know. I couldn't really figure out how to monetize. How much did we actually spend on this? But it's north of $5 million. It's probably in the $5 to $10 million range on the infrastructure and the systems required to run all this stuff. So the next slide, please, would be just a few of the MLS nuances. So I figured this picture would be appropriate because yes, they're all vegetables, but they're quite different. And ultimately, the MLS data is very local. It just is. I mean, if you live in Minnesota, you got to be able to search lake names, and if you live in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, you search by township. You don't search by city. If you're in Denver, Colorado, you got to be able to know that there's backs to green spaces or open spaces. Or if you're on the east or west coast, you're going to worry about what type of water access you might need. Or if you're in the mountains, what do the views look like? So it is very local. There's nuances with respect to addresses. Different parts of the country, you might have an address that this is how you refer to it, but that's not how the U.S. Postal Service recognizes it, and are tough to geocode. There's still challenges with trying to understand how to deal with bathrooms and bathroom counts. Deleting data is a big challenge. Some of the MLSs actually provide information about how to delete data. Others do not, and you have to go through this process of comparing massive amounts of data in order to keep everything in sync. A lot of our clients complain about what we call Houdini data, and that's the listings that just disappear, and we don't know why they disappear. They just do. They come off market, and maybe maybe it's a feed that doesn't, they don't show temp off market. That's not an option in IDX, so just poof, the listing is gone, which creates a lot of challenges. We have to be able to compensate for that. Some of the MLSs offer open house information, some don't. Same thing for foreclosures or contingents, pendings, solds. Even though solds were mandated, we still are only seeing about half of the MLSs out there that are actually providing them in the disclosure states. Some offer really good structure around their data, some don't. There are, in the data that we receive, this is quite interesting, 441 unique statuses. So I thought there's only like 8, but 441 different ways of saying what a status is. You would expect there's active and there's, generally speaking, then you have your contingents and pendings and solds, and then the various other ones that go around them. We just ran a little query, and there are 1,000. You're not going to believe this. 1,816 different unique property types.
Wow.
So we have to standardize that down into 11, somehow. But my favorite, and I would, if anybody in the audience knows what this is and wants to chime in, I'd love to know. But I think the most unique property type that we found was one labeled Earthship. Earthship, and I couldn't believe it. There's a,
what's that?
I don't know, truck station was another one, truck terminal, interesting property types out there. So again, it's just challenging. So then in photos, in some cases order is provided most of the time, some cases it's not, so we have to deal with that. And fees, Jim mentioned this, sometimes there's no fee, whether it's IDX or a VOW or a broker feed or a third-party feed or other. Sometimes it's just a flat monthly fee, sometimes it's a flat annual fee, sometimes it's by customer count, sometimes it's a flat rate, other times it's a scaled rate. Sometimes there's a flat fee plus a fee scale based on the number of customers. Sometimes there's extra costs for solds or open houses or VOW. So really tricky for new vendors and people that are trying to come in and again scale at volume to understand how do you deal with it? How do you price your product? I mean, what do you do? It's very tricky. And then you have the contracts. There's an enormous variance between contracts from MLS to MLS, whether it be for IDX or VOW or a third-party feed or, again, a broker-only feed. And then you got the compliance variance. There's I'd say generally 80% of the compliance is, standard. The rest is not. I mean, the rest of it can be pretty tricky, and you have to be able to you have to learn your way through that. And it's by combing through contracts and extracting rule and reg data from that. Very, very tricky. So again, we've gone through the process of productizing this to make all this stuff a lot easier and to be able to provide the data to these folks that help them execute much more efficiently.
Well, we have a question from the audience while we're talking about compliance and stuff.
Sure.
Does WolfNet act as a compliance arm for third-party vendors to who you send data, or do you rely on the individual MLS licenses to define that and then rely on the individual MLSs to enforce the compliance?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question. So in our actual contracts with vendors that would like the data, we incorporate into the contract all the MLS contracts by reference. And we also further state that there are requirements to comply with the rules and regs, and then we offer a compliance service. So before they put their products out to market, we'll go through and do compliance reviews in advance, and then so that actually we act as sort of an additional compliance arm for the MLSs. So we want them to be compliant. If they're not compliant and we're involved, even if we're a third party, and MLS is still at the top, they're still the vendor, we're just a third party, but nevertheless, as a third party, we want to make sure that the customers we're working with are compliant, they're doing what they're supposed to do, and they're playing ball. That only inures to their benefit, and it certainly works better for us. If all of our customers were having compliance problems all the time, I don't think the MLSs would be granting us the permissions that they have been.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks.
Sure. Okay. So on the next slide, how does it work on our end? And just real quick, we do some due diligence as well. We have a lot of experience here. We've done quite a bit, so we can see which companies and products coming to the market seem to make sense. It's not really, I know it's not our place. Jim mentioned that it's not up to them to determine what product the broker or members should or shouldn't use. Let's just say that we give it a good once over to make sure that it's not vaporware and there's not something funky going on. The process then, really the vendor, if it's a vendor, the vendor has to go get their vendor agreement through the MLS, and the MLS has to grant that permission. So that's as you would expect. And then we provide the data access, and that can be direct database access or it can be through an API, either way. And then, we offer up, one of the things is that photos, and most of the MLSs out there, there's about 20 or 30 or so that offer the photos through URLs, like Jim mentioned MLSLIstings does. In our case, we offer every one of them through a URL, and they all run through a CDN. So the customers don't download them. There's no need to download them. They are, secured and spot. In fact, they're even delivered through HTTPS. And if they have to download them, they can. There's certain applications that may require photos that they bake them into comparative market analysis or something like that. So there are cases where it makes sense. And then here's that the bit about compliance. We do offer the reviews and help our customers get through that. We also offer the contract processing services. I mean, we know our way around the contracts. We probably process in the neighborhood about 1,500 contracts per month. And it's really helpful, frankly, for the folks working at the MLSs as they're receiving the paperwork. When they get it from us, they know it's right. They probably gravitate towards it at times because they know it's going to be all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, and everything is filled in like it's supposed to be, and it doesn't require back and forth. So it's very efficient. And then there's additional benefits here, which are, again, these folks can focus on app development, again, whether it's a vendor or a broker. We can help with the go-to market strategy. We can help them understand the fees and the rest of it, the contract processing services to help them get what they need quickly. There's about 50 to 60 MLSs that offer geocoding. That's pretty decent. Most of them do not. In our case, when we deliver the data, we deliver it with geocoding on every single property across the board, rooftop. And we also do verified and standardized address information. So we take the addresses and run them against the U.S. Postal Service and set up a separate table that shows, hey, here's the USPS verified address, which is also nice for deduplication purposes. We do the photo URLs, and we're also photo categorization and tagging, so we can analyze images and say what it is. Hey, this is a bathroom, this is a bedroom, this is a exterior photo, this is the mudroom, this is the laundry room, and also tagging. So, hey, that's a stainless steel appliances in the kitchen, or that's an island, or that's a dual vanity, or a tile floor or carpet. And then complementary data for public records and parcel shape files, neighborhood and school data. So we're wanting to help these folks get everything they need in one place. And then on the next slide, I just a few of the benefits to the MLSs. I mean, really, back up one slide. It's the same fees. There's lower expenses, and the expenses are lower because there's less bandwidth. When you onboard clients, onboard a new vendor, usually there's a fair amount of back and forth on questions about the data or compliance matters or whatever. They consume a lot of resources, especially in the initial time frame. So we basically take that all that burden over and help solve a lot of those matters in advance or while we're moving along. They're the same contracts. We just digitize them, and they're also more accurate because when we submit them, they're right. And we also ensure that the member, if we're doing the contract processing, we're ensuring that the members, that is a member in good standing before we submit the contracts. And there's less bandwidth for the MLS to mess with, which is also less expense for them. And then there's that image, and I had to put the cop in there with the guy running away with the bag. That is that additional layer of compliance enforcement. We definitely assist in that capacity. I feel that we make a fundamental difference there. And then finally, that's really the MLS in that last little image there in the puzzle piece. The MLS remains at the center. I mean, we're not trying to disintermediate. We're not trying to, we're not a Trojan horse. We're not looking to how can we benefit from this exclusively or in some special way. We're facilitators, and we're trying to make the process work as efficiently as we can for everybody. So on the last slide is just, our model, 640 MLSs today, 600 with approval. For MLSs that have approved us, there's no system installs. It is the same process. Generally speaking, it's just far more efficient as we operate with it. And we can cover all the data sets. We do this for a multitude of customers, whether it's IDX or VOW, broker only or a third-party feed, depending on the approvals. We do the geocoding and the photos via URL, which are again better efficiency and it's better security on those photos. That localized data is maintained. We don't standardize this data down to the nub to the point where it's just designed for a portal. The data that when we bring the data in, we are standardizing and we're maintaining those local nuances because ultimately it is a local business. We are a practitioner. We run this IDX and VOW data, and we have clients that it's very important. They know what their customers want, and we make sure to maintain that level of data. But we also provide the data in a more a more normalized or standardized format, so that if you are a portal, you technically could operate that way as well. And updates as fast as every few minutes, really good in that capacity. And really, in the end, the MLS maintains control. These feeds are controlled by the MLSs. We're not taking that control position at all. If an MLS wanted us to, I'm sure we'd be open to it, but that's not our objective. If that's an opportunity, then it is. So, and that is the key differences there. I think that is
Gotcha.
That's my last slide. I think we go into some questions if any of the audience would like to put out some questions.
Yeah, let's talk on there's a question about photos. And Jim mentioned it early on that he sees having a link to photos as opposed to housing them as a key advantage. Can you just reinforce again the differences? And Jim, if you want to jump in on that a little bit too, but if you want to start that, Joel, why is that valuable to people?
Well, I mean, first of all, if you think about a vendor comes out, and let's just take, for example, I don't know, CRMLS. And let's say you're going to go in and you're going to get active listings and you're going to get sold listings for the past 3 years. Right there, you're talking about 700,000 listings. All right, on the actives, including pendings, it's probably 110, 115,000. And take 20 photos a piece as an average, and then at least one photo, but there could be multiple photos for the solds. You'd be looking at having to download, millions and millions of photos just to get going. All right, and then you're going to have to maintain them. You're going to have to delete the ones when the listings go. You're going to have to download new ones. Whenever there's a change, you got to download them again. It is a huge headache. So if you were to talk to the vendors who were out there and ask them, what is one of the biggest headaches in dealing with massive amounts of data? And you're talking to the technical staff, they're going to say the photos are a nightmare. It's a huge pain. So when you can remove that pain button and just say, okay, here you go. Photos are all done through a media table, and it's just a URL, and you just call the URL. It really changes the ballgame and makes it easy.
Well,
Gotcha. So if go ahead, Jim. Sorry. Go ahead, Jim.
Secures the images better too.
Gotcha. So you're not worried about people stealing them as much if you have it where they have to pull or use a link. Interesting. Okay, so that sounds like a big advantage. And can people if they just wanted to have that portion of your system, Joel, could they just buy that piece?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, even MLSs might be interested in that service.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. So maybe, and I'm not asking you to throw anybody under the bus here. I'm just trying to better help people understand the differences between you guys. What would you say is kind of the difference between the approach that you're taking and the approach that some others that are in the market are looking at?
Well, so I think number one is that we go a little bit deeper into the data. It's not like here, I'm not just trying to solve a quick problem and help my MLS friends, comply with RESO. That's not our objective. Our objective is to serve the vendors who are out there who need this data, that are trying to provide services to the member brokers and agents. And so I think we're really focused a little deeper into the equation, so to speak, as it relates to the depth of the data, the quality of the data, the ancillary data that comes with it, and the business processes that you have to get through to be effective. Again, we are trying to work within the system the way that it is today and make it more efficient. We don't want to, like I said, we don't want to disintermediate anybody. We want to facilitate. And there's, fundamentally, those are some of the key differences. I feel like our, the experience with the data and the years that we have under our belt and the experience as a vendor in that capacity is a big advantage as well.
Gotcha. I think you answered this question, but just quickly, with over 640 MLSs, what portion of the total listing count do you cover today?
99.
99. Okay, that's what I thought. Just wanted to be sure. Here's another question about photos. In regard to the photo URLs versus downloading the actual photos, our MLS system provider thinks allowing vendors to access URLs would be a bigger strain on their bandwidth than actually downloading each image. Do you find URLs increase or decreases the bandwidth required to provide that media?
It decreases the bandwidth because, I mean, you'd think it would be more, but if you use a content delivery network, if you're using a CDN, basically what happens is the first time that somebody calls that photo, it gets put in cache and it's moved into the various different points up on the CDN. So the next person that asks for that photo, it comes out of cache. So it's not coming and hitting your originating media servers. So it's much faster, much more efficient, and I think it takes a lot of pressure off system. So, but if you were to just to take and set up media servers and then say, okay, everybody come get your photos from the media server without using a content delivery network, yeah, that would be a lot more pressure.
Gotcha. So it really is a more efficient way of doing it. That's interesting. Okay. Let's see what else we have here. Just look through the questions real quick. So I guess you mentioned this earlier, but you talked about the role of facilitator versus some other one. Tell us what do you mean by that, a facilitator? So are you like an extension of the MLS? Do you see any ways that you're going to leverage the data and other products down the road, or how does it work with you guys?
Well, so we are a vendor, right? So we offer our own products and services, and we are a practitioner and a consumer of that data, and we are, like I said, I believe we're a very good steward, and I'm proud to say that. When I say facilitator, it means that what happened was we had so many phone calls in the past where people were calling us up saying, hey, you get all this data, can we buy it, can we buy it, can we buy it? And the answer was no, 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 no. Well, I'm an entrepreneur. I hate saying no. It kind of hurts to say no,
right.
especially when there's money on the table and we can help people. So we evaluated a little more carefully and said, well, wait a second, if we're a third party and we actually get permission from the MLS and we can help these companies move to market faster, well, then why wouldn't we? So that was kind of that was what drove it. And then, as we looked at, productizing it the whole way, we started, focusing specifically on that as being a service. And then, that of course led to the contract processing and the compliance consulting and the rest of it. So I don't really see that there's really there's no additional benefit beyond, because we already have this data. It's already in our system. We have it and we consume it from products and services. So, we already have it.
Right. So this is truly about, like if you're an MLS and you could afford your staff, each group would hire them, but instead you use your 14 people to help all of them across the country do what they need to do. Is that the simplest way of defining it? Yeah. Yep,
I think so.
So there's no other end game here other than to enable the process of aggregating and distributing data.
Right. Yep. And it's just it makes it just that much easier when the fields are called the same thing, and I can move quickly, and these guys can focus on application development. The MLSs are getting paid, the compliance is being done, the contracts are in place, everything is working efficiently. That's really what we're going for. And of course we want to make a profit while we're doing it.
Of course, but it sounds like you're making the process a lot easier, especially for MLSs that don't have Silicon Valley staff at their beck and call like Jim does, and even Jim is using it because he sees the advantage of it. One more question on photos. That sounds like a hot topic today. How many MLSs have the URL capability you were talking about, or is it all done on your servers?
So the last I checked, I thought it was somewhere like 56, but it turns out that was really closer to the number of MLSs that are providing geocodes. The MLS is providing photo URLs. It's less than 30 out of 640. So it's really a fraction. And I don't know why that is. Frankly, it's our preference, and I feel like as a vendor, if it's our preference, and then that's why as we productize, we said, well, clearly the vendors that would want this are going to want it through a URL, so that's how we should deliver it.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Any closing remarks, Joel? We're just a little bit over time, so I appreciate anybody that's hung in here with us. But anything that you want to tell people about? Obviously, your contact information is here up on the screen. So if anybody has interest in understanding more about WolfNet as one of the key providers of MLS aggregation distribution, there's where you can reach out to them. But any other final words you want to leave with the audience today?
Well, just that I feel like we're fairly creative folks. So if there's any needs out there and any interest in exploring options, we're always happy to do that.
Okay, sounds great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending today. I hope you learned a lot about this exciting system that WolfNet's developed, and thanks to Jim and Ken for lending your candid thoughts and interests about how this whole data aggregation thing works. And if you have any other questions, again, reach out to Joel, joel.mcintosh@wolfnet.net, or call him 612-342-0088. And if there's anything we can do for you at RETechnology, feel free to reach out to me at marilyn@retechnology.com. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day, and I hope everybody gets to figure out how to work all this great stuff out.